Imagine walking alone in the dense Australian bush at night. The air is still, the trees whisper, and then you hear it. A heavy branch snapping, followed by footsteps. Not human footsteps. Too heavy. Too deliberate. Your heart races as a deep growl echoes through the darkness. For centuries, people across Australia have told stories of a terrifying creature that lurks beyond the campfire's glow. They call it the Yowie, a massive, hairy, human-like beast that roams the wilderness. To some, it's Australia's answer to Bigfoot. To others, it is much more than that. A being woven deep into the country's oldest stories, a creature that refuses to disappear. The Yowie is not a new invention. It has been part of Aboriginal dreamtime mythology for thousands of years, described as both a protector of the land and a fearsome monster. When European settlers arrived in the 1800s, they too began reporting strange encounters. Towering figures in the bush, glowing eyes at night, enormous footprints pressed into the dirt. The mystery only grew stronger. But what exactly is the Yowie? Witnesses describe it as anywhere from 6 to 10 feet tall, covered in dark hair, with a stench so strong it makes people gag. Some claim it screams with an unearthly howl. Others say it follows silently, watching from the shadows. Despite countless sightings, no one has ever captured one, at least not officially. Skeptics argue it's nothing more than myth, a mix of folklore and fear of the unknown. Yet even today, reports continue to surface. Hikers, campers, even locals in small towns swearing they've seen something they cannot explain. In this video, we'll dive deep into the mystery of the Yowie, from its ancient origins to chilling eyewitness encounters, to the theories that try to explain what this creature might be. Is it just a legend, or is there really something hidden in the heart of the Australian wilderness? The answer might be closer than you think. Long before European settlers set foot in Australia, the continent's First Nations people already spoke of the Yowie. In Aboriginal culture, the Yowie is not just a monster. It is part of the dream time, the sacred time of creation when spirits shaped the land, the animals, and the people. Stories of the Yowie stretch back thousands of years, passed down through songlines, carvings, and oral tradition. The creature goes by many names depending on the region. Some tribes called it the Yahoo, others the Doolagal or Quinkin. While the names and details change, the idea remains the same. A powerful human-like being that lives in the wild places far from people. Descriptions from Aboriginal tradition vary. In some stories, the Yowie is a dangerous predator, tall, hairy, with glowing eyes and a violent temper. It is said to attack hunters or snatch away the careless. In other versions, it is more of a spirit guardian, a warning presence that reminds people to respect the land and not wander too far into dangerous places. What makes these stories so fascinating is how deeply they are tied to the environment. The Yowie is often linked to mountains, caves, and rivers, the untamed parts of the bush where humans rarely go. To many elders, the Yowie was less about a physical creature and more about teaching lessons. Fear of the Yowie kept children close to camp and stopped adults from venturing into risky territory. Yet, there are also accounts that sound much more literal. Some dreamtime stories describe large footprints found in the soil, or encounters with giant ape-like men that walked upright. These sound eerily similar to the reports that settlers would later give hundreds of years after. This overlap is important. It means the Yowie is not simply a modern myth copied from tales of Bigfoot or the Yeti. It is a creature deeply rooted in Australia's oldest culture, existing long before Western ideas ever reached the continent. Whether seen as a spirit, a warning, or a flesh-and-blood beast, the Yowie has been part of Aboriginal knowledge for millennia. And when Europeans arrived in the 1800s, they too began to meet something strange in the Australian wilderness. When European settlers arrived in Australia in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, they came with little knowledge of the land or its mysteries. The dense forests, strange animals, and haunting sounds of the bush often unsettled them. So when they began to hear Aboriginal stories of wild, hairy men living deep in the wilderness, many dismissed them as superstition. That is, until they began to experience something for themselves. One of the earliest recorded accounts of a Yowie-like creature dates back to the 1820s. Settlers in New South Wales reported seeing huge man-like beings covered in hair, standing upright, and vanishing into the trees when approached. Some described footprints far larger than any humans, pressed deep into the ground as if made by something incredibly heavy. By the mid-1800s, the wild man of the bush had become a recurring story in colonial newspapers. Articles told of strange cries echoing at night, livestock being attacked, and travelers frightened by hulking figures that darted into the scrub. These weren't isolated tales. Reports came from across the colonies, from the Blue Mountains of New South Wales to the remote ranges of Queensland. Perhaps one of the most chilling early accounts came from the 1840s, when a group of timber cutters claimed they were stalked by a massive hairy man for several nights. They described glowing eyes watching from the darkness and heavy footfalls circling their camp. Too afraid to stay, they abandoned the area completely. What makes these stories stand out is how closely they mirror Aboriginal descriptions of the Yowie, even though many settlers had little contact with indigenous people at the time. Both groups spoke of a tall, hairy, human-like creature that seemed to appear and vanish without explanation. Skeptics in the 19th century suggested the sightings were misidentified escaped convicts or simply bushmen living rough in the wild. Others believed the isolation and harsh conditions of frontier life played tricks on the mind. Yet, the sheer number of reports made it difficult to dismiss. By the end of the century, the Yowie had become a fixture in Australian folklore, part warning, part wonder, and an enduring mystery of the outback. And as the stories grew, so too did curiosity about what this creature actually looked like. As time passed, the stories of the Yowie only grew louder. By the 20th century, the creature was no longer just an old myth whispered around campfires. It had become the subject of countless eyewitness accounts, some so detailed they are hard to ignore. One of the most famous regions for Yowie activity is the Blue Mountains just west of Sydney. This rugged, forested area has long been a hotspot for sightings. In the 1970s, a series of terrifying encounters made headlines. One man reported being chased by a towering, ape-like figure while driving through a remote mountain road at night. He described glowing red eyes and a foul stench that filled the air as the creature ran alongside his car before vanishing back into the bush. Another chilling report came from Queensland's Gold Coast hinterland in the 1990s. A family camping near a river awoke to the sound of heavy footsteps circling their tent. At first, they thought it was a cow or kangaroo, but when they looked outside, they claimed to see a huge, hairy silhouette standing upright, watching them. Terrified, they stayed silent until dawn. The next morning, they found enormous footprints pressed into the soft soil by the water. Hikers and farmers have also shared stories of sudden encounters. A bushwalker in the late 2000s described seeing a creature nearly 8 feet tall standing among the trees, its long arms swaying as if trying to balance. When it realized it had been spotted, it let out a roar so loud that the man said it felt like the ground itself vibrated. Not all sightings are distant or vague. In one case from 1979, a man near Canberra claimed he was actually attacked by a Yowie while walking home at night. He described being knocked to the ground by a strong, hairy figure before it suddenly bolted into the darkness. Police investigated but could not find any explanation for his injuries. What's most intriguing is the consistency across decades and locations. Witnesses often describe the same details: a towering, hair-covered figure, an overpowering, musky smell, a scream or roar unlike any known animal, enormous footprints too wide and deep to be human. With so many stories, from ordinary families to hunters, hikers, and even police officers, it becomes harder to dismiss the Yowie as simple imagination. But if all these people truly saw something, what could it have been? For every chilling Yowie story, there is also a voice of doubt. Scientists, skeptics, and wildlife experts often argue that the Yowie is less a creature of flesh and bone and more a creation of imagination, folklore, or misidentification. The first explanation skeptics give is mistaken identity. Australia is home to many large animals that can appear frightening in the right conditions. A kangaroo seen at night, half hidden by bushes, might look strangely human, and wallabies can leave unusual tracks in soft soil that might resemble oversized footprints. In poor light, the mind fills in the blanks, and a startled person may swear they saw something monstrous. Another explanation is the power of fear and suggestion. When people camp in remote bushland surrounded by eerie sounds and total darkness, even small noises can feel threatening. If someone already knows the legend of the Yowie, their mind might interpret natural sounds of branch snapping, an animal call, the rustle of leaves, as signs of something far more sinister. Scientists also point to the lack of hard evidence. Despite hundreds of reported encounters, no one has ever produced a Yowie skull, body, or clear DNA sample. The footprints, hair, and blurry photos that occasionally surface are often explained away as hoaxes. In fact, in the 1970s and 1980s, pranksters admitted to carving large wooden feet to stamp fake tracks in the dirt. Cryptozoologists, researchers who study hidden or unknown animals, argue that the absence of evidence does not prove the creature doesn't exist. They point out that vast areas of Australia's bushland remain largely unexplored, and large mammals like gorillas were once dismissed as myth until proven real. Still, mainstream science remains unconvinced. For skeptics, the Yowie is less about biology and more about culture, a legend that explains the unknown, teaches caution, and fuels local identity. Yet even the strongest skeptic cannot ignore the passion of eyewitnesses who insist they encountered something beyond explanation. And this raises a bigger question. Even if the Yowie has never been caught, why has it captured the imagination of so many Australians? Whether real or imagined, the Yowie has left a lasting mark on Australian culture. What began as ancient Aboriginal stories has grown into one of the country's most recognizable mysteries, shaping folklore, tourism, and even business. In the late 20th century, the Yowie stepped out of the shadows and into pop culture. One of the most famous examples is the Yowie chocolate brand, launched in the 1990s. Each chocolate treat came with a small toy of an animal or sometimes a mythical Yowie itself. For many Australian kids, this was their first introduction to the legend, turning a terrifying bush monster into something playful and fun. But the cultural impact doesn't end with candy. The Yowie has become a tourism icon, especially in rural towns close to hotspots for sightings. Statues, gift shops, and Yowie-themed tours can be found in areas like Kilcoy, Queensland, where locals proudly call their home the Yowie capital. Travelers often visit hoping to hear stories from residents who claim personal encounters. Documentaries, books, and podcasts have also kept the legend alive, presenting the Yowie alongside global cryptids like Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, and the Yeti. Skeptics may laugh. Believers argue that the Yowie gives Australia its own unique mystery creature, one that reflects the harsh beauty and danger of the outback. More importantly, the Yowie is part of Australia's identity as a land of secrets and wilderness. It represents the unknown corners of the bush, the feeling that even in a modern world, some mysteries remain unsolved. Whether used for storytelling, entertainment, or tourism, the Yowie continues to walk a strange line between fear and fascination. But beyond culture and legend, what are the actual theories about what the Yowie might be? If the Yowie is more than just a myth, then what could it be? Over the years, researchers, cryptozoologists, and everyday believers have suggested a number of theories. Some are grounded in science, others lean into the mysterious and supernatural. One popular theory is that the Yowie may be a relict hominid, a surviving population of an ancient human-like species. Some suggest a link to Gigantopithecus, a massive ape that lived in Asia hundreds of thousands of years ago. If small groups migrated and survived in Australia's remote wilderness, they could explain the large, hairy, human-like figures people describe. Another theory leans into the spiritual and supernatural. Aboriginal stories often describe the Yowie not just as a creature, but as a spirit connected to the dreamtime. In this view, the Yowie is not something that can be captured or studied like an animal, but rather a being that moves between the physical and spiritual worlds. This would explain why it appears suddenly, then vanishes without a trace. There's also the idea of collective folklore. Legends of wild, hairy men exist in almost every culture, from Bigfoot in North America to the Yeti in the Himalayas. Some researchers believe the Yowie is simply Australia's version of this universal myth, born from fear of the dark and unexplored places. Of course, skeptics argue the Yowie is nothing more than hoaxes and misidentifications, but believers point out that the sheer number of reports, many from credible witnesses, makes it harder to ignore completely. Whether it's a flesh and blood animal, a spirit of the land, or a symbol of human imagination, the Yowie remains one of Australia's greatest mysteries. And even today, people still claim to see it. Today, the Yowie still refuses to disappear. Reports continue to surface every year, from hikers deep in the Blue Mountains to farmers in Queensland who swear they've seen something huge and hairy crossing their land. Online forums and local newspapers regularly share fresh encounters, and entire communities remain convinced the creature is real. What makes the Yowie so powerful is not just the possibility of its existence, but the mystery it represents. In a world where satellites map every inch of land and science explains most natural phenomena, the idea that something unknown could still roam the Australian wilderness is both terrifying and thrilling. For some, the Yowie is a flesh and blood animal hiding in the vast bushlands. For others, it is a spirit of the dreamtime, reminding people of the land's sacred power. And for skeptics, it is a legend that lives because people need mysteries to believe in. Maybe the truth lies somewhere in between. If you're fascinated by mysteries like this and want more deep dives into the unexplained, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. It helps us bring you more stories that the world has almost forgotten. The Yowie may never be proven real in a laboratory or captured on camera in perfect detail, but it lives on in stories, in culture, and in the hearts of those who swear they've seen it with their own eyes. And perhaps that's what makes the Yowie eternal. Not just a creature of the wild, but a creature of the imagination.